Picture this: 120 luxuries suddenly sprouting on your property like mushrooms after rain. The HOA president smirking, lawyers in expensive suits laughing at your naive mistake. Well, they forgot one tiny detail. I'm a forensic accountant who specializes in property fraud for 15 years. By the way, where are you watching from? Drop your city below. I bet your HOA horror stories are just as wild. What they didn't know was that every brick they laid was building their own prison. Let me tell you how I turned their greed into the most satisfying legal trap ever. The morning I returned from my 6-month consulting project in London, the Arizona sun felt extra welcoming on my face. I was Brian Jordan, 45 years old, and ready to finally settle down on the 50 acres my Aunt Margaret had left me. The Uber driver kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror as we approached what should have been empty desert land. "Sir, are you sure this is the right address? This looks like a whole new development," he said, slowing down. My heart sank as I saw row after row of identical beige houses where my aunt's wildflower field should have been. 120 homes, complete with manicured lawns and HOA-approved mailboxes, stood on my property. The Emerald Heights community sign mocked me with its pristine gold lettering. I paid the driver and walked straight to the sales office, where a perky blonde realtor jumped up to greet me. "Welcome to Emerald Heights. Are you interested in our Phase 2 homes? We're 70% sold already." I pulled out my property deed. "I'm interested in knowing why there are houses on my land." Her smile faltered, then brightened again. "Oh, you must be Mr. Jordan. Melanie Ross, our HOA president, has been expecting you. She said you might have some confusion about the development agreement." The sales office was a testament to suburban excess. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and walls covered with architectural renderings of an even larger development. Phase 2, apparently, would include a golf course and country club on my land. The realtor, whose name tag read Brittany, nervously tapped at her computer. "Mrs. Ross said to send you right up if you arrived. Her office is on the 2nd floor of the administration building." She pointed toward a gleaming glass structure that looked more like a corporate headquarters than an HOA office. As I walked through the development, I noticed the details that my forensic accountant's eye automatically cataloged. The streets were named after precious gems: Sapphire Lane, Ruby Court, Diamond Drive. Each house had the same beige stucco exterior, with slight variations in trim color. The landscaping was immaculate, but sterile, with not a leaf out of place. Residents were out walking dogs or jogging, all eyeing me suspiciously. I was clearly an outsider in what had been my own property. I met Melanie in her upscale office, where she smugly claimed that the development was by the book. She was 52. With perfectly styled silver hair and the predatory smile of someone who'd gotten away with murder before. Behind her desk hung her law degree from Stanford and several civic awards, strategically placed to intimidate visitors. "Brian, so glad you could finally join us," she purred, sliding a thick folder across her mahogany desk. "As you can see, we sent multiple notices to your registered address about the development plans. When we received no response, we proceeded according to the HOA bylaws your aunt agreed to when Emerald Heights was first established in 1998. She opened the folder, revealing page after page of legal documents, certified mail receipts, and public notices. Everything was done by the book, I assure you. "But registered address?" I asked, flipping through the papers. My blood ran cold when I saw it. 123 Maple Drive, my aunt's old house that had been demolished 2 years ago after she passed. The certified mail receipts all showed delivery attempted. No such address. Melanie's eyes glinted with satisfaction. "The address on file with the HOA. We followed proper protocol, Brian. Every notice, every deadline, every opportunity for you to object, all properly documented and sent to that address." She leaned back in her leather chair. "I understand this might be overwhelming, but the development is a fait accompli now. Perhaps we can discuss compensation for your cooperation." I studied her face, noting the slight twitch at the corner of her mouth, a tell I'd seen in countless fraud investigations. "You knew that address was no longer valid," I said quietly. Her smile never wavered. "We are required to use the address on file. It's not our responsibility to track down property owners who failed to update their contact information." She pulled out another document. "Your aunt signed this HOA agreement in 1998, clearly stating that all official communications would be sent to the address of record." I stood up, keeping my poker face intact, a skill honed from years of investigating financial fraud. "I'll need time to review these documents with my attorney." Melanie's smile widened. "Of course, but I should mention that fighting this would be expensive and futile. We have the backing of Morrison, Keller & Associates. You might have heard of them." I had. They were the legal bulldogs who'd crushed 3 environmental groups trying to stop a pipeline last year. As I left her office, I overheard her telling her assistant, "He'll fold. They always do." Walking back through the development, I noticed more details. Security cameras on every corner, a private security patrol car making rounds, the entrance gate with a guard station. This wasn't just a housing development, it was a fortress. My aunt's 50 acres had been transformed into a controlled environment where every aspect of life was regulated. I stopped at the spot where her favorite oak tree used to stand. Now, it was a decorative fountain surrounded by benches bolted to concrete. That night, I sat in my hotel room, surrounded by papers and my laptop, doing what I did best, following the money. Something about Melanie's confidence bothered me. It wasn't just arrogance, it was the certainty of someone who'd done this before. I started with public records, and within hours, I'd found my first breadcrumb. Melanie Ross, formerly Melanie Ross Hutchinson, attorney registration suspended in 2016 for conduct involving dishonesty, fraud, deceit, or misrepresentation. The plot was thickening, and I hadn't even started digging into the HOA's financials yet. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Heard you're back in town. If you want the real story about Emerald Heights, meet me at Java Junction tomorrow at 10 a.m. A friend." I smiled. In my experience, anonymous friends usually meant someone with a guilty conscience or a score to settle. Either way, they often had the best information. I texted back a simple, "I'll be there," and returned to my research. By 3 a.m., I'd mapped out 15 other properties that had mysteriously ended up under Emerald Heights control in the past 5 years. The pattern was clear: elderly owners, out-of-state heirs, and always those notices sent to outdated addresses. Java Junction was a small coffee shop on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where the regulars knew everyone and strangers stood out like sore thumbs. It was deliberately chosen, I realized, far enough from Emerald Heights to avoid surveillance, busy enough to provide cover. I arrived early, ordered a black coffee, and chose a corner booth with a view of the entrance. The morning crowd was a mix of construction workers grabbing breakfast and retirees solving the world's problems over unlimited refills. At exactly 10 a.m., a young woman in a crisp navy suit walked in, scanning the room nervously. When our eyes met, she nodded slightly and approached me. "Mr. Jordan, I'm Allison West. I think I can help you with your situation." She slid into the booth across from me, her hands trembling slightly as she set down her briefcase. Up close, I could see the dark circles under her eyes, partially hidden by carefully applied makeup. This was someone who hadn't been sleeping well. "I used to work for Melanie," she began, keeping her voice low. "Fresh out of law school, I thought I'd landed my dream job with a successful attorney. She was brilliant, charismatic, everything I wanted to be." Allison pulled out a folder. "Then I discovered what she was really doing. The Emerald Heights HOA isn't just a homeowners association, it's a sophisticated property acquisition scheme. Melanie targets vulnerable properties, uses obscure HOA bylaws to justify takeover, then partners with developers to flip the land for massive profits." She opened the folder, revealing meticulously organized documents,
emails, financial records, internal memos. I started noticing discrepancies about 6 months into the job. Properties being added to the HOA jurisdiction without proper authorization. Elderly homeowners signing documents they didn't understand, forged signatures on critical paperwork. Her voice hardened. When I brought my concerns to Melanie, she laughed, said I was being naive, that this was how business was done in the real world. I leaned forward. Why come to me? Why not report this to the authorities? Allison's laugh was bitter. I tried, but Melanie's connected. She's got judges, city councilors, even some FBI agents in her pocket. When I threatened to expose her, she had me blacklisted, said I was a disgruntled employee making false accusations. No firm in 3 states will hire me now. She pushed the folder toward me, but I kept copies of everything, including proof that she knew your aunt had passed away when she
repeated, then looked down at my papers as if considering. The land was worth at least $5 million undeveloped. Melanie's eyes flashed. Was worth, Mr. Jordan. Past tense, the situation has changed. That's when Jim Harrison stood up from the front row. He was a large man with the kind of tan that came from golf courses, not construction sites. Look, buddy, he drawled, you can take the offer, or you can spend the next 10 years in court. Your choice. I let the silence stretch, then pulled out my phone. Before I decide, there's something everyone should hear. I played the recording Allison had made yesterday when she'd met with Melanie. Melanie Floyce filled the room. Of course I knew the old bat was dead. That's why I sent the notices there. Brian Jordan was in London, probably sipping tea and eating crumpets. By the time he figured it out, we'd have everything locked down tight. The room erupted. Residents started shouting questions. Melanie's face went from red to white. That's taken out of context, she stammered. But I wasn't done. I also have copies of the real environmental reports, the ones showing contamination levels 3 times the legal limit, the ones you hid from these families who bought homes here. Now the residents were on their feet, demanding answers. Jim Harrison tried to slip out the side door, but found it blocked by Connell Lewis, my next-door neighbor from childhood, who'd become one of Emerald Heights' residents. I don't think so, Jim, Connell said firmly. We all need to hear this. Melanie tried to regain control. This is ridiculous. He's obviously fabricated these recordings. I'll be filing defamation charges first thing tomorrow. But the doubt was spreading through the room like wildfire. I pulled out more documents. Speaking of legal issues, does anyone know that HOA funds have been used to pay for Melanie's personal legal defense in 3 separate fraud cases? Or that the construction company that built your homes has filed for bankruptcy twice under different names? The meeting descended into chaos. Melanie fled to her office with Jim close behind. Several residents cornered me, demanding to know more. How deep does this go? Asked a young father holding a baby. Are our homes safe? I chose my words carefully. I'm working with the authorities to get to the bottom of this. Your homes are structurally sound, but there are issues that need addressing. I promise you, my fight isn't with any of you, it's with the people who defrauded all of us. That night, Allison called with news. Melanie's panicking. She's moving money to offshore accounts and shredding documents. But here's the interesting part. She called someone she referred to as the senator, told him the situation was getting out of control. I smiled grimly. Good. Panicked people make mistakes. What about our federal friends? Allison's voice was excited. The FBI agent you contacted? He's very interested. Turns out they've been building a case against Jim Harrison for money laundering, but couldn't connect him to Melanie until now. As I hung up, my laptop dinged with an email from an anonymous address. Back off or things will get very unpleasant for you. You don't know who you're dealing with. Attached was a photo of my house in Boston. I forwarded it straight to the FBI and texted Allison. Looks like we're rattling the right cages. Her response was immediate. Melanie just offered me $1 million to steal your evidence and disappear. Want me to take it? I laughed out loud. Absolutely. Let's see how she plans to pay you. The next morning brought a flurry of activity. Melanie had filed an emergency injunction to stop me from harassing residents and spreading false information, but she'd made a critical error. In her haste, she'd included financial documents that actually supported my claims. Her lawyer, a nervous young man who kept adjusting his tie, realized the mistake too late. Judge Patricia Reeves, known for her nonsense approach to property law, raised an eyebrow as she reviewed the file. "Counselor, did you actually read these attachments before submitting them?" The young lawyer, whose name tag read Kevin Marsh, turned crimson. "Your Honor, we filed these documents under extreme time pressure. My client felt it was urgent to protect the community from—" Judge Reeves cut him off. "From what, exactly? From learning the truth about their homes? I'm looking at bank statements here that show systematic transfers from HOA accounts to offshore entities. Is your client aware that financial disclosure in court filings is subject to perjury laws?" Melanie, sitting at the defendant's table, was frantically whispering to a senior partner who just arrived. Richard Blackstone, the infamous shark of Arizona real estate law, stood smoothly. "Your Honor, if I may take over for my colleague, there's been a misunderstanding about the scope of these documents." But Judge Reeves was having none of it. "Mr. Blackstone, I don't care if you're replacing counsel. These documents are now part of the public record. They show clear evidence of financial irregularities that warrant investigation." Meanwhile, Melanie was moving faster than a cat on a hot roof. She'd managed to sell 80 of the 120 homes to unsuspecting buyers, pushing through closings at breakneck speed. But instead of stopping her, I let her dig her hole deeper. Each sale created another victim, another person who's standing to sue her. Each rushed closing meant more paperwork errors, more evidence of fraud. Allison, playing her part perfectly, was feeding me inside information while pretending to help Melanie cover her tracks. That afternoon, I visited the county recorder's office with a forensic auditor I'd hired, Patricia Nguyen. She specialized in real estate fraud and had worked with the FBI on several high-profile cases. As we pored over the deeds and transfer documents, Patricia whistled low. "Brian, this is worse than we thought. Look at these signatures." She pointed to a series of documents. Same notary on all of them, but the notary's license expired 3 years ago. Every single one of these sales is legally questionable. I studied the papers more closely. And look at the timing. All these closings happened within a 72-hour period. No legitimate real estate operation processes this many sales that quickly without proper due diligence. Patricia nodded. "It's a clear pattern of fraudulent conveyance. She's trying to create so many individual property claims that it becomes impossible to unwind the transactions. Classic asset protection strategy, but executed so sloppily, it's actually creating more evidence." "She's getting desperate," Allison reported during one of our clandestine meetings at a truck stop outside town. "She's pressuring buyers to close without proper inspections, offering huge discounts for cash deals, and I think she's forging signatures on disclosure forms." She handed me a flash drive. I copied everything before she could destroy it, including emails where she explicitly tells Jim to use substandard materials to cut costs. Oh, and there's something else. She pulled out a folder marked Config. These are internal HOA communications about something called Project Clean Sweep. Apparently, Melanie has been planning to demolish the original section of Emerald Heights, where your aunt's house used to be, and build a luxury resort. The environmental contamination was going to be her excuse to condemn the properties and force sales at below-market rates. I felt my anger rising. So she pollutes the land, uses that pollution to force people out, then profits from redevelopment. Allison nodded grimly. "Exactly. And she's been using HOA funds to pay off environmental inspectors to look the other way." The corruption ran deeper than I'd imagined. I spent the rest of the day creating a detailed flowchart of Melanie's operations, tracking the money through a labyrinth of shell companies and offshore accounts. By evening, I had mapped out connections to 3 city council members, 2 state legislators, and a federal judge. The pattern was clear. Melanie had built a network of corruption that reached into every level of government. But networks have a weakness. They're only as strong as their weakest link. That evening, I received a call from Special Agent David Chen of the FBI. "Mr. Jordan, we've been monitoring the situation. We'd like to meet." 2 hours later, I sat in a nondescript office building, looking at a wall covered with photos and documents, a sprawling web with Melanie and Jim at the center. "We've been investigating Harrison for 18 months, Chen explained. But Ross was always too clever, too careful. Until now." He pointed to a photo of a distinguishing-looking man with silver hair, Senator William Thornton. "We believe he's been providing political cover for their operations in exchange for campaign contributions." "The senator?" I said, remembering Allison's intelligence. Chen nodded. "Exactly. Your evidence could be the key to bringing down the entire network, but we need you to do something risky." He outlined their plan. I would meet with Melanie, wearing a wire, and offer to settle. The goal was to get her to admit to the broader conspiracy. She's smart, I warned. She'll be suspicious. Chen smiled grimly. That's why we're going to make her think she's winning. The trap was set for Friday afternoon, but Thursday night, everything almost fell apart. Jim Harrison, perhaps smarter or more paranoid than we had given him credit for, smelled a rat. He confronted Allison in the HOA office after hours, accusing her of being a spy. The confrontation turned physical when he grabbed her arm. What Jim didn't know was that Allison had been recording everything on her phone. His threats, his admission that they had dealt with problems like Brian before, and most damningly, his boast that the senator will bury all of you. Allison managed to escape and drove straight to the FBI office. By Friday morning, we had a new problem. Jim Harrison had vanished, along with $5 million from the HOA accounts. Melanie was beyond panic now. She was desperate, which made her dangerous, but also sloppy. When I walked into her office that afternoon wearing a wire under my shirt, she didn't even pretend to be cordial. "What do you want, Jordan?" she snarled. The polished facade was gone, replaced with raw survival instinct. "I want to end this," I said calmly. "You've sold most of the houses. You've made your money. I'll take $10 million and sign whatever you need." Her eyes narrowed. $10 million? You're out of your mind. But I could see her calculating, weighing the cost against the risk. $5 million, she countered, and you sign an NDA. You never speak about this again. I pretended to consider, then shook my head. $8 million, and I want it in cash tonight. She laughed, but it was a brittle sound. Cash? What do you think this is, a movie? But I could see the wheels turning. Cash